Now again with Iran's leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei having accused the West of hypocrisy regarding the use of chemical weapons. Ayatollah Khamenei said that today Western governments make a furor about the employment of chemical arms, while during Iraq's imposed war on Iran, they gave the former Iraqi regime such banned weapons. Iran's leader added that ex-Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein used the same arms not only against Iranian troops, but against cities and civilians. Ayatollah Khamenei singled out France and Germany as suppliers of chemical weapons for Saddam Hussein. He said German and French people should know what their governments did to Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei was speaking during a meeting with a group of commanders of Iran's armed forces. Joining us out of Ontario, Canada now is Jason Unruhe, political commentator. Hello, Jason. Your thoughts on the Iranian leader's words of hypocrisy out of the West?
Well, that certainly is a tremendous amount of hypocrisy. The U.S. is one of the worst abusers in the world for chemical weapons. We saw recently with some of their offensives inside of Iraq just recently, they were using the dreaded white phosphorus that has been known to cause incredible burns greater than just about any other weapon on the battlefield itself. We also know that it's largely suspected that the United States supplies the same white phosphorus to Israel, which it uses on many of the unarmed Palestinian protesters. The U.S. has a very long history of using chemical weapons and supplying them to different regimes around the world. I mean, the Iraq under Saddam Hussein was a perfect example of that. Now, in there, Saddam used mustard gas, Tarbon, other things, and around at least 1987, there were many instances where they were deliberately used against civilians, not even against legitimate military targets. We also know from investigations that the chemical gas used against the Kurds during their uprising, in which the United States said they were going to aid the Kurds if they rebelled against Saddam Hussein, was supplied to Saddam through a German company. The West has a very long history of supplying these kinds of weapons to terrible regimes like that of Saddam Hussein, and used in wars, very terrible wars like the previous Iran-Iraq war. Now, the United States is wholly hypocritical in its stance that it wants to get rid of chemical weapons when they themselves have such a huge stockpile of them themselves. I mean, this is not a secret. The world knows that the United States has massive biological and chemical weapons stored up to be used in various situations. I mean, you don't have chemical weapons or biological weapons unless you intend to use them in some way, shape, or form. This is, it's tremendously hypocritical by them, and that we are reminded that the OPCW, their investigation into the last alleged chemical attack by the government of Bashar al-Assad, determined that there was no chlorine used. There was no chemical attack that actually took place. It was completely faked. I mean, I myself sent that to Theresa May on Twitter when she spoke at the UN Security Council meeting. It is still repeated that the Assad government uses weapons when even the OPCW certifies that it never happened. It is a tremendous hypocrisy from these Western governments, talking about how they have such concern over such weapons and even nuclear weapons that are now in the hands of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, when they themselves are the greatest purveyor of such weapons and often let rogue states like Israel use them with absolute impunity. As many of your viewers will know, Israel has a nuclear weapons program that has zero oversight by the international community. So definitely Iran is very right to be outraged. Any speech made in denunciation of the United States in this regard is wholly justified.
I want to thank you for joining us and for your input there, Mr. Jason Unruhe out of Ontario, Canada, political commentator.